Okay, so I want to start by talking about Hugh Hefner because Hugh Hefner's death is apparently a deep cultural moment. The obituaries are just endless. The New York Times ran a 3,300-word obituary about a guy who's mostly famous for putting boobs in a magazine, which is pretty incredible, who lived the life of a Saudi oil sheik, but occasionally published John Updike and Norman Mailer, and therefore, I guess, his entire life was just roses and nothing but. We'll get to all of that. And as you may have noticed, I don't abide by this rule that when someone dies, we have to pretend they were awesome. So I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what Hugh Hefner meant to culture and what we should take away from that. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at Wink. So, does the current news cycle make you want to drink heavily? If so, Wink is the place to go. Their wine is just terrific. People around the office have tried their wine. They say that it's just wonderful. But what makes Wink special is that if you don't know anything about wine, if you're an ignoramus like I am and you don't know whether you're drinking turpentine or wine or Manischewitz, it doesn't really matter to you, but you have to go to a dinner party and don't want to look like a fool, you go to Wink. They have an algorithm, and you tell them what you're about to eat, what your tastes are, and they'll recommend the best bottle of wine, and they will send it directly to you. So now you know, and you don't look foolish, and the wine is terrific. So go over and check it out right now. Wink is offering listeners $20 off your first order when you go to trywink.com/Ben. That's trywink.com/Ben. It's spelled WINC.com. And again, you take that brief palate profile quiz, and they will recommend distinct, interesting wines customized to your palate to be shipped directly to your door every month. And right now, Wink is offering listeners $20 off your first order when you go to trywink.com/Ben. Go and check it out. It is awesome. Everybody at the office uses it, and they say that the wine is just terrific. Okay, so I was going to begin with Trumponomics, but it's more fun to talk about Hugh Hefner, right? I mean, this is why Hugh Hefner is a cultural figure, because we have to pretend that Hugh Hefner was a forward-thinking genius of the culture instead of basically a purveyor of pornography. Now, none of this is to say that he doesn't have a First Amendment right to push his pornography. I mean, he did have a First Amendment right to push his pornography, although I think there actually is a fairly decent argument under the First Amendment that the First Amendment was not supposed to cover obscenity. Like, I don't think that John Adams and James Madison were sitting around in 1789 thinking to themselves, you know what we really need to protect? Hugh Hefner with the money shot. That's what we need to protect, right? What Robert Bork argues in his book talking about the First Amendment is that the First Amendment was essentially in trying to protect political speech. That was the goal. But let's assume that we're going to take a libertarian position on the First Amendment. Better that government should not regulate any of this than that government should regulate the wrong stuff. So let's say that all this stuff is protected. Now the question becomes, was Hugh Hefner's business good for the world, or was it kind of bad for the world? So what I've seen a lot of in the obits today is focus on the stuff that is not Hugh Hefner's core business, right? I've seen a lot of focus on the fact that he supported civil rights, which is great, terrific. You know who else supported civil rights? Rosa Parks. You know what she didn't do? Pose nude, right? So this idea that Hugh Hefner is somehow culturally important because of civil rights is not the case. Okay, let's be real about this. Hugh Hefner is famous because he was an old perv. Okay, he was a perv from the time that he was young, and he was a perv when he was super old, and became a parody of himself. He didn't become a different human. He wasn't different at 30 than he was at 91. He's the exact same person. He never changed. And that's why it was so ridiculous watching him try to live the life of a 30-year-old swinging bachelor when he was 91 and somebody had to milk his prostate for him. The whole thing is ridiculous. So the New York Times runs this glowing obit of Hugh Hefner. I did look it up. I was trying to figure out whether they granted more time to Hugh Hefner or Ronald Reagan. They did grant more time to Ronald Reagan, so good for the New York Times on that. They granted more time to Hugh Hefner than William F. Buckley, which I think is sort of telling about where the Times stands on this. But here's what they write. And this is, I don't even have to give you indicators like this. I'll just read you this glowing profile of Hugh Hefner, apparently one of the greatest human beings to have ever walked the earth. It goes Moses, Jesus, Hugh Hefner. So here's Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner, who created Playboy magazine and spun it into a media and entertainment industry giant, all the while as its very public avatar, squiring attractive young women and sometimes marrying them well into his 80s, died on Wednesday at his home, the Playboy Mansion in Los Angeles. He was 91. Okay, let's imagine for a second that Donald Trump, God forbid, had died before he became president of the United States. His obituary would read very much like this from the New York Times. Right? Donald Trump, a man famous for squiring around young women and sometimes marrying them. But now the New York Times doesn't like Donald Trump because Donald Trump's a political figure, right, on the right, and therefore he's an evil, vile man with women. Evil and vile, do you understand? Now, I think that Hugh Hefner was pretty vile with women. I think that Trump's history is not particularly great with women. I'm pretty consistent on this stuff. But it is amazing how the politics shift how people view people's treatment of women. I'm old enough to remember when feminists thought Hugh Hefner was gross. But now he's sort of a hero, right? Hugh Hefner's great. He liberated us from the constraint of our own sexual puritanism. First of all, the arrogance and self-aggrandizement of the 1960s generation feeling that they are the first to discover that it feels good when you put a penis in a vagina is just incredible to me. Like, I'm sorry, people have known this since forever. Okay, this is how evolution built humans and animals. Like, there's nothing new here. And treating it as though there was some sort of grand movement forward because Hugh Hefner put boobs that men like in magazines and then slapped a John Updike article between the boobs. Like, this is always the joke about Playboy, right? He'd put these kind of highfalutin essays in the middle of money shots of 18-year-old girls. And then it was like, ooh, isn't he a sophisticate? Isn't he a sophisticate now? Wouldn't he have been more of a sophisticate if he just, I don't know, published John Updike? Like, maybe the only way he thought he could get people to read Updike was to put it between the boobs, but I'm pretty sure that the main point of Playboy was the boobs and not the John Updike. And he was just trying to facilitate his own fame and reputation for being a sophisticate by publishing highfalutin essays. There's no difference between Playboy and Hustler magazine except for the essays and this bizarre cultural impression that Hugh Hefner was somehow a force for tremendous good while Larry Flynt is just a smut purveyor. Anyway, here's what the New York Times continues to write. Before I get to, I want to say that you want to watch how America has evolved. Don't look at Hefner. Look at the feminist take on Hefner. So the feminist take on Hefner